All right, so welcome to the 5th episode. This is 5.
Number 5.
This many.
Big milestone.
Indeed. With the 5th episode of the GameFor Podcast to celebrate GenCon happening this week and GameFor's involvement with the GenCon pop-up events, which we'll talk a little bit about. We're going to talk about our first gaming event experiences, going to conventions, going to whatever kind of gaming events that are out there, and maybe some ideas about things that you can do at conventions and things to prepare for and that kind of stuff.
Exactly, yep.
My name is Adam.
I'm Matt.
And we're part of Milk Can, which you can see behind us. And Milk Can, we are a company that makes a bunch of different things, software mainly, but we're also all gamers. And we made an app called GameFor, which is designed to help connect tabletop gamers. You can get it on Android, you can get it on iOS. You can use it to find gaming events in your area, local game stores, wherever you travel.
Yep.
Conventions, other players, all kinds of stuff, groups and clubs,
Right.
all that kind of jazz. So check it out. We'll talk a little bit more about it at the end. But before that, and before we get started on today's subject, we're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on with us lately.
Yeah, so my gaming group, my Sunday D&D group, I should say, they've been playing Dragon Heist, which is one of the campaigns from Wizards.
Wizards of the Coast,
Yep. It takes place in Waterdeep, and we are nearly complete.
Wow, okay.
So, which is exciting because while Dragon Heist has actually been a lot more fun than I thought it was, it's going to get us into the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is kind of like the sequel, and that's really the one I had looked forward to, and I'm looking forward to. And I'll take them from they're level 5, and I'll take them from level 5 all the way to level 20.
Dude, wow, I can be in there a while then.
Oh yeah, so that should take a long time, but
yeah, because that normally, like in most tabletop RPGs, it's kind of progressive. Like, you know, getting from level 1 to 2 is quick, and then level 2 to 3 is a little bit less quick, and then 4, and yeah, so 20. Wow, that's up there. I don't know if I've ever, like back in the day when I first played, I don't know that I ever got to 20.
Yeah, I think like 10 or 11 is maybe 12.
I know I got to like, I know a guy and I were, and a couple other people were playing, and we got up like near 15, but we were all pretty young, and we all basically were cheating all of the time. I mean, not like cheating each other.
Right.
Like, just okay, so then we killed all those gnolls, right? Yeah, okay, cool, all right. And and just
that's like the equivalent of like 5 dragons.
Yeah, exactly. It's fine. So yeah, we did a lot of that. I mean, the DM was like was perpetrator number 1 in that situation.
Right.
But we still had a good time.
That's really important. Yeah.
Indeed.
But yeah, I've been doing that, and I've also been prepping for that conference, which is a tech conference. But our company's been involved for 3 or 4 years now. We do the mobile app for them.
And it's in Wisconsin.
They started
Dells.
Yep.
And it's a big, like,
water park.
1,600 some tech folks all come together for a conference in August.
2,000 now, I think.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah,
wow.
It's getting way up there.
Yeah.
And the Dells is the water park capital of the world.
This is what they say.
So it's a giant place with a big water park. What I like about it, unlike most tech conferences or even game conferences, is it's devoted mostly to your family. So there's actually family learning stuff. There's events for the kids,
plus all the water slide stuff
and all the water slides. They one of the nights we get a water park party. They close it down to everyone else, and only attendees and their families are allowed to attend from like 10 o'clock till like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. But yeah, it's a big IT kind of developer conference, and we built the app for them, and we've had a relationship with them for a while.
They do a big tabletop night now.
Yeah, that's right.
On Tuesday, I believe.
And last year we ran didn't we run the library?
We ran the
board game library.
Yep, with our local game store.
Like they couldn't make it because wasn't it during GenCon?
Yeah, it was
right near
right
GenCon?
next to it. Yeah, they moved it now, so it's like an extra day out. But still, we're gonna bring their library and some our library and a friend's library, and so we're gonna be running that again, which should be a lot of fun. We had, I think, over 110 games checked out last time.
Nice.
And then
gotta bring along some GameFor banners and stuff like that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And then. And I think like last year the game store offered they have an online presence, so they were giving out discounts to anyone that showed up.
So yeah, if you use their library at that conference, it's called that conference, which is sometimes confusing.
Right.
But yeah, if you use the library at that conference, then you got a discount.
Yeah, it was like 10%, I think. Which is still And then this year they're also going to be doing a bit larger. They had done a smaller version this last year, but now the conference size is twice as big because of the facilities. They're doing a makerspace, which is going to be talking about everything from like how to solder circuit boards, building your first circuits, 3D printing. So
3D printing, which is your jam lately.
Right. So I'm going to be showing people 3D printing and hopefully making some on-the-fly 3D printed swag.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So yeah, I've been prepping for that.
Yeah, that's very cool. I'm still painting Star Wars Legion models and getting those guys done. It's not that there's a ton of them, honestly. Like my Empire army, all told, will probably be less than, I was going to say less than 30 models. That's probably not true, but less than 35 models.
Okay.
Which in comparison to bigger army games, like back in the day, Warhammer Fantasy, even to this day, Warhammer, 40K, even though it's been streamlined and things like that, you're still generally in a normal, let's say 2,000 point game, you're normally still having more than 35 models.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got fewer models than your average kind of bigger army game, but it's not a skirmish game either. So,
right. Okay.
And they're fun models, and I've been enjoying it, but I'm getting better. I'm getting closer on it, and then after that, I'll probably switch over. The one, again, downside is that right now in this area, like the game's doing well for being only a year old, but it's not taken off a ton in our area.
Right.
So what I'm trying to do in building a gaming community is I am painting not just my Empire, but I'm also going to paint the Rebels too.
Yes.
So that when I go to the shop or if I talk to somebody on GameFor and things like that, and I've already posted some things on GameFor saying, hey, looking for Legion players.
Or if there's certain people in the office that want to try it out.
Right, exactly, same thing. Then basically I can just be like, well, pick an army and we'll play one of these two.
Yep.
But I just wanted to have them all painted before I started doing that.
Yeah.
So, because I'm a dork that way. Yeah, and then the other thing is I'm building Age of Sigmar Warcry terrain.
Okay.
So Age of Sigmar Warcry, when this comes out, I don't know if it'll be in stores yet. But I got my copy early because I'm a big fancy YouTube guy. And so I've been putting together the terrain, which is very cool. It's very cool. And even before, like when they were first talking about it and showing off the terrain and stuff like that, I was like, at the very least, I want that terrain just because it's awesome.
Right. These are all new sculpts, I'm assuming.
Yeah, the terrain is all brand new. It's a game that is roughly the same size as Kill Team, meaning that the Kill Team is played on a standard. It's played on a 22 by 30 inch board, which is quite small in comparison. Like normally you play 40K on a 4 foot by 6 foot table. This is played on a much smaller board, and Warcry is the same, got the same small kind of board, and it's a very much more tight kind of hand-to-hand combat sort of fight sort of a thing, and that's very cool. But there's also multiple levels because the buildings are all kind of ruins and stuff. But there's still like a second floor, and there's walkways across and things like that. So it's really kind of neat that way. And then the models themselves, what kind of differentiates this game from Kill Team? In Kill Team, they have the terrain, but you could use technically any terrain you want. And you can do that too in Warcry if you want. If you already have terrain that you want to use and you don't want to buy their terrain, knock yourself out. All you really need is the rules booklet. But in Warcry, they also have kind of special models. Like there are special, completely all brand new, like teams.
Oh, okay.
Whereas in Kill Team, it was designed to be played with the current 40K models that were already out there. Not all of them, but a good portion of them.
Sure.
So they didn't have to make new people for a Kill Team.
Okay.
In Warcry, they're making new people.
Yeah.
But the idea is then also they're making, I think, 6 different warbands that are all completely new. But then you can also use some of the other older Age of Sigmar stuff, or not even older, but just the current Age of Sigmar stuff for the other forces, and use those. So you get a choice whether you want to use the stuff you've already got or you want to buy these new guys.
All right. And are these warbands going to get into Age of Sigmar eventually?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm assuming so. The way that they do it with like Warhammer Underworlds, aka Shadespire, aka Night Vault, all that kind of you buy those little warbands. There's like a little box, and you get anywhere from as many as 3 models up to as many as like 8 in a box, depending on the warband. If they're real small, little tiny guys, then you get more guys. But if they're big, huge, tough, burly folks, then you get less. Those all have special rules, so you can use them in normal Age of Sigmar. So I'm pretty sure they're doing the same thing here, but I can't off the top of my head remember. And I haven't seen the actual stats yet on them, but yeah. So yeah, I've just been basically working on the terrain and all that kind of stuff. And technically, when this hits, I will be at GenCon. So
that's
that
right
too. But yeah, looking forward to that as well. So speaking of GenCon being one of the largest events in this country, not the largest event in the world, but the largest event in our country for tabletop gaming, this week we're talking about the concept of going to gaming events, whatever they might be. It might be a convention. It might be a tournament. Maybe you're into Magic.
Right.
There's tons of tournaments for that. It could be an expo. It could be. There's a lot of different things it could be. What was your first gaming event tabletop gaming event that you did as a kid?
So it would be about middle school. So I had a friend whose older brother was in high school, and his friends were all into D&D, and as such, they needed more people.
Sure.
So being the smart kids, they allowed us to play from time to time, but basically got us into D&D to where we had our own gaming group. But they let us know that our local university was having a D&D weekend. Once I found out more about it, they did it twice a year, run by the club at the university, and it was basically a weekend long. Started Friday night, went till Sunday. So yeah, the first year we went on Saturday, entered into a couple of D&D campaigns and played that. But then it became a regular thing that we did I would say within the first, I would say the second or third one we went to, our parents would drop us off Friday and then pick us up on Sunday because they had overnight game sessions going on. So we basically would not sleep.
Literally, you would not.
Yeah, we would go to
I was going to say, like, did you guys stay in a hotel?
No. We would just walk. We would walk down to there's a local convenience store. This is in Maine, so it was Cumberland Farms, I believe, and get our caffeine fix, Mountain Dew and all that stuff at the time, and head back to our next session. And I'm sure that there was adults sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, these annoying middle schoolers."
They're back. Yeah,
but we had a blast.
Yeah, no, I bet. Yeah, no, that's interesting.
And that was where I
don't know if you could do that anymore.
No, and there was a one they didn't. I think they had like one vendor, and that vendor was the one that taught us into buying Magic the Gathering cards.
Oh,
so that was what we did while we were waiting for other sessions, was play Magic.
Play Magic, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's Magic to some degree, especially early on, was like purpose designed for, like, hey, when you're waiting for Bob to finally show up and get here so you can start the next night of the campaign for your D&D, you can sit around and play this Magic game because it's pretty quick and fast and doesn't take up a lot of space.
Yeah, little did I know that guy was just making us go broke.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, it kept you off of drugs,
You're right. I had no money for drugs.
This is exactly it, yeah. So, yeah, no, that's very cool. No, I never did anything quite like that, but years and years ago I ran a LAN party, which is like for computer gaming and stuff like that, and people would show up and everybody brings their computer,
right?
And then you plug them all together and network them and all that kind of stuff. And kind of along the lines of your thing, like this was in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and Madison, Wisconsin's about an hour and a half south.
Yep.
And this woman drove up with these 3 kids who were probably all at the very latest, very early high school, but probably middle school. And she just dropped off like her son and 2 of her son's friends with their PCs on like Friday afternoon, because we would rent an old movie theater that was now being used as like a play theater, like a theater. And so we would play on the stage because a couple of the guys who were in the group were part of the LAN party and stuff. So we would just give the theater like $50, and if they weren't using it that weekend, then we could hang out. And she just dropped off like 3 kids and then didn't come back till Sunday. You know what I mean? And she just like talked to me for like 5 or 10 minutes to make sure that I wasn't like a crazy person or whatever. Right. And everything looked legit. She's like, all right, cool. And then just gone.
Totally
and I was like, I was probably in my 20s, and I was like, man, that seems like a bad idea. I don't know if that's a good.
Right.
I mean, I knew it was going to be fine, basically.
Yeah.
And those kids came for years. Like we would do those things
That's
all
awesome.
the time, like three, four times a year, and they would show up quite frequently, all the way through high school and stuff. So yeah, that's cool though.
So how about you? What was
my first tabletop gaming event was actually in the city that's between where we are in Appleton and where I live. So I drive past it every day. Actually, I drive past the building that it was in every day. It's right near the highway. And it was a gaming convention in 1989, back in the halcyon days of 1989.
Okay.
It was called StarCon. 89, and I also went to StarCon.
That is totally an 80s name.
Oh, totally. Too. Yeah, absolutely. I also went to StarCon in 90 too. I still remember like the logo. I don't think I still have any of the like the flyer or the book or anything like that from it or whatever. It was small. It was a real small convention. Took place at what do you call it? Like a labor temple. You know?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
And so it was just, and like the entire like room area, like, it was a good size kind of like meeting room, ballroom sort of thing. Ballroom makes it sound way fancier, but it was like a VFW, you know,
right,
like a big
right.
room. And because I don't know, someone there was really concerned about bacteria, so like they really just bombed the heck out of the urinals with those giant urinal cakes. So the entire building smelled like urinal cake, you know. But it was just like, even to this day, if I walk in someplace and immediately get hit with the smell of urinal cake, I start thinking back to StarCon. It does. It really does. So yeah, it's. But it was a tabletop gaming convention. It was a lot of board games. I was not really yet into miniatures. I was a little bit into it. Like I was interested in I do remember that year that there was a painting competition. I remember seeing. They had like a whole bunch of the painted models, and I remember a lot of them being 40K and stuff like that, you know, Warhammer, science fiction. And I remember one guy had a whole bunch of these models painted, and I think they were dreadnoughts. So dreadnoughts are these kind of larger, like walking robot type guys. They're bigger than a standard guy by a good deal. And there's actually like a nearly dead soldier inside the giant walking robot that's steering it. So like if you get almost killed in battle and you're a really good warrior, then they will take you and put you inside one of those machines so you can still fight.
So like RoboCop, but
RoboCop, but like the size of like 3 SUVs.
Right.
Like you're quite large. But then a lot of times they'll have these banners that kind of hang off the, like, you'll have like a pole that goes up the back, and then there's like a banner that hangs off of the, you know, the thing. And normally the banner that hangs down is some sort of standard, some sort of like, this is our chapter, this is
third regiment,
whatever, that kind of stuff. But this guy had gone through, and I don't know if he found stuff out of magazines and stuck it on there, or if he hand painted it, but it was all like anime girls that were on these, like, you know, not naked ones or anything, just like regular kind of like anime girls and stuff like that, which was a weird kind of dichotomy. And I was like looking at them like, I really like this paint job, but that banner is really throwing me off. You know what I mean? It was just really weird. So, but that I remember strongly. The smell of urinal cakes I remember very strongly. I won a door prize for a game called, I think it was called World in Flames, and it was like a World War II, like if you took Risk and Axis and Allies, made everything made out of cardboard, like no plastic in the entire box, but made there be like 6,000 pieces, and make it. It was like super duper heavy duty grognard, like really deep game for people who were really into World War II. And it had amazing like production value, like on the outside of the box. It was gorgeous. And when I won this, I was like, wow, it was huge, this huge box. And I opened it up, and it was just filled with tiny little cardboard chips. And then that was like it. And I was like, there's no like tanks in here, nothing cool, nothing. No, I never played it, as it turns out. So sorry about that. But I also remember one of the big games that I did play there was this game called Supremacy, which was an older board game, kind of a war game board game. So it was along the lines of like Risk or that kind of stuff, or Axis and Allies. It was like Risk, but basically on steroids. And I played it with some other folks that I knew, and we were like, well, let's get together and play it. Like, we played it every Thursday night anyway, but we're like, hey, let's get together and play it at this place. And we were like, all right, I guess. I mean, you know, it was cool because we got to see the other stuff and everything like that. It was just basically us just playing a game. Like, that game took us so long, we would play it every Thursday night, and it's not like we would play one game every Thursday night. It would take us sometimes a month to get a game done. So I don't know what we were thinking trying to get one game done in 2 days, but whatever. So it was still fun though. It was a lot of fun. I have tried to recreate that atmosphere a little bit in some of the stuff that I've done as far as event planning and things like that to some degree that I've done in the future.
Now you've done a lot of like hosting your stuff.
Yeah, so because of like that kind of convention, I really got interested in wanting to run a gaming convention here in town. And so I was looking into like the Eagles Club ballroom, and I was looking into like all kinds of places for years trying to get prices and things like that. And then I did eventually, sometime right around 2001 or 2002, I got a convention started in town. So I live in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and so I called the convention OshCon, which just made sense.
Yep.
And the first several years, it was in the basement of the Masonic Temple downtown.
Okay.
So the Masonic Temple basement, which had its own strange smells, which was interesting because also they rented that basement out to folks that raced RC cars.
Okay.
And so it smelled like, it's called tire compound.
Right.
So it's got this wintergreen kind of, it's like these guys race on carpet tracks, and they race these like really super flat, like Le Mans style cars, and they're really close to the ground, and they don't use rubber tires, they use foam rubber tires. And so they rub this compound, this fluid on it before they put it on the track so it'll stick to the track better. And it has this wintergreen, just powerful wintergreen smell. So whenever you walk down in there during a race, like the carpet smells like it that they lay down, and everything smells like the wintergreen. And even years later, walking down in there, it still smelled like wintergreen to some degree, which is better than urinal cake for the most part. But yeah, so I ran this little convention. Like the first year was like, I don't know, 60 people, maybe something like that. And this is back pre-internet. Well, not really.
Okay.
I mean, 2001. But it was not. It was certainly pre-Facebook.
Okay, right.
So and pre-apps and like all these different things. It was like if you didn't know about it, it was pre-Google, nearly 2001. Like I was probably still using Alta Vista. You know what I mean? Like it was hard.
Yeah. I was using Hotbot or something.
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of hard to still find stuff like that. But I wanted to make it just a general tabletop gaming convention. So there was. People could come run RPGs. People could come run board games. At that point, I was starting to get more interested in miniatures, but it was still sort of difficult to get people to kind of like bring that kind of stuff to run at conventions.
Sure.
Because you're bringing a board game to a convention. It's a box. You set it down. You open it up. Everything's inside.
Yep.
You're going to do that with miniatures. You're bringing a mat or a board and the terrain and blah blah all that jazz. So anyway. But yeah, I did that I ran OshCon and eventually moved it to the university. I ran that for like 11 years.
Oh, wow.
So there was 1 year where I didn't run it, and it was 2004 because the Masons were trying to sell the building at the time, which did not work out for them.
Okay.
And also it was the year I was getting married. So I basically just took that year off kind of.
Good choice, probably.
Yeah, but yeah, so ran it for 11 years until 2012, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was the last year, 2012 or 2013. Right when I started the YouTube channel, actually. The
wow.
idea was, I'm going to stop doing this and I'm going to start running the YouTube channel because I just don't have the time to do both. Then, fast forward about 5 years or 4, and I decided to start running a little miniature convention for the folks who come to who are fans of the YouTube channel.
Right.
So that's when TMX started, which is the Tabletop Minions Expo.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I called it an expo instead of a convention is because the real takeaway I want from people who come to TMX is I want them to come and not bring their miniatures. Like they're not going to a miniatures tournament. They're not bringing, they are going to come and it's an expo because you're going to learn new games.
Yep.
Everybody who comes there and you've been there.
Yep.
And everybody who comes to the thing, you're playing demo games. You're learning new stuff.
Right.
And those people, the game masters who are running things, are bringing everything so that you can play.
Yeah, there's new games, old games. There's games. Yeah, it's always fun when somebody hasn't been to one before and they come in and they're like, "What is that?" And they're like, "What is that? What is that?" And
and it's small. I mean, again, like I think this year there was like 70-ish people, something like that, and that's fine. But on the other hand, like a couple of them came from Australia,
right?
A couple of them came from the UK. People came from West Coast, East Coast, Texas, So
right.
And that's because of the YouTube channel and the stretch of that. if you don't have your own YouTube channel, which most of you don't, and you wanted to start something like this, then you've got to do a lot more advertising in your local area. Like I don't bother like hanging up flyers at stores or anything along those lines. I just basically talk about it on the YouTube channel. But
normally your local ones will advertise your game stores, your gaming groups, and
on
Facebook.
Different things, and and definitely, and you can also put your convention into GameFor, for free, and then people can find it in their local area. So there's that too. There's a lot more tools actually that are available for people who, if you want to run your own convention. It's hard work, I've had people be like, oh man, like 10 years you're going to be as big as like Adepticon or something like that. I'm like, no, not even. I don't want that.
Yeah, right.
No, that's a massive amount of work putting on a convention that big. Even putting on a convention a third that size is still a massive amount of work. Right. So I want to keep it small, but with OshCon I got to I think one year we had about 250 people.
That's a good size. Yeah.
And again, it's if you got a day job, you've got things to do. So if you decide to make your convention your day job, then you've got to work a lot harder to get more people there because you want to be able to make more money and that kind of jazz and whatever. So there's that. But the majority of gaming conventions and events are for the most part run by individuals, run by people, I mean maybe groups of people, but it's not like they're run by big companies. It's not like they're run by massive corporations.
Right.
The majority of them, there are some out there.
Right.
But the majority of them are run by people who are passionate about tabletop gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So those are the events that we have gone to or ran. What about the events that we do now? So
so like I said, GenCon. So GenCon is the biggest tabletop gaming event in America, in the United States. It these days is around 60 to 62,000 folks.
That's crazy.
Yeah, in Indianapolis. It originally started more than 50 years ago in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, actually, hence the term Geneva Convention, hence GenCon. That's where it came from. And it was originally actually a miniatures convention. Of course, it wasn't called miniatures back then. It was just basically called wargaming because it was all American Civil War. It was what we now call historicals.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was all historical like battles. And it's great because a couple of years ago when it was the 50th anniversary, they had this big museum that they set up. And they had pictures, and it was just so funny because it was like 1967 or whatever, when they first started. They had pictures from the first one, and it's all guys in like horn-rimmed glasses with white button-down short-sleeve shirts with like pocket protectors and the whole deal, like standing around looking very serious, but pushing around their like toy soldiers and stuff and everything. And that's how it started. But it has now grown to be massive. On the 50th anniversary, they built using like those like kind of velvet ropes to rope off, so like don't go over here, that kind of thing. They built using like velvet ropes and stuff like that, a shape, and that was the shape of the original horticulture center in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where the first GenCon was held.
Okay.
And that's what they had the museum of all the cool stuff inside. So somebody built a replica of the entrance to the horticulture center. Yeah. And then everything else was like roped off.
Sure.
And then so this was the size of the entire building that the first GenCon was in. That museum was on the 50-yard line of the Lucas Oil Center where the Indianapolis Colts play.
Right.
And that was only a portion of all of GenCon now, because like they had that thing there, and then there was like laser tag, and there was like a games library, and there was a whole bunch of RPGs and all kinds of other stuff just going on the football
field. Yeah.
Then there were other rooms all around that building that they were using, and then you walked across this underground kind of passageway over to the big Indianapolis Convention Center, I think they call it.
Right.
And that entire building is completely filled with GenCon, and it's taken over two huge, massive buildings now at this point. But it was just, I think it was an amazing image to just see like this tiny little building in the middle. I went way up in the stands at the football stadium and took a picture of the overall thing, and you could see like this little tiny thing in the building where the menu or where the museum was, and that was the original GenCon. And now this is only a portion that's taken over. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they never expected that.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely not. But it was very interesting, and it is the biggest in the United States. Biggest in the world is actually Essen Spiel. Essen. Yeah.
No, Essen Spiel in Essen.
Yeah, but it's and that is in Germany, and that's I don't know. I think it's twice the size, isn't it? Like 120,000 or something crazy like that.
Yeah, and it's because I think it's spread out so much that
True.
I don't know if they have an accurate amount, like number
so
of
big
people.
They don't even know how big it is.
Right.
It's crazy. Yeah, and that's but again, that is, well, both of these conventions, if you're going to take a look at the 4 genres, like in GameFor, we've got that filter at the bottom, and you can filter by genre. You've got board games, you've got CCGs, which are collectible card games, you've got RPGs, which are role-playing games, and you've got war games, miniatures and whatnot. Of those 4, at these big conventions, I would say 70% is maybe board games.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just look at the market in general.
Right, it's the majority.
It's the majority. Maybe it's 60 because RPGs is a huge group.
It is.
And collectible card games, not as big. I mean, nearly every game store is going to carry Magic.
Right.
They'd be silly not to.
Mm-hmm.
But, and so tons of people play that kind of stuff, but there's not nearly as many collectible card games as there used to be because there used to be a zillion of them, and then all of a sudden, finally Wizards of the Coast, I guess, got a patent and said because they invented collectible card games, which I guess they kind of did. I don't know. I don't know a ton about it. But then all of a sudden, the heyday of collectible card games disappeared.
Okay.
And then it was basically just Magic and like Pokemon and a couple others. And I don't know if they're paying a licensing or what's going on. But you don't see nearly as many of those. Like back when GenCon was still in Milwaukee, because it was in Lake Geneva for years, and then it moved to UW Parkside, and it moved around Wisconsin a bit, and then ended up in Milwaukee for years and years and years. And then in 2002, I think was the last year it was in Milwaukee, and then moved to Indianapolis and has been there since 2003. The the card games, that's kind of the big thing. And I remember the last couple of years when it was at GenCon, you'd be walking and like every other booth was a collectible card game.
Right.
And now that's not the case anymore. It's just kind of Magic and a couple other smaller ones.
Right.
So again, in that kind of group, you've got your, sadly, my beloved miniature gaming is the smallest of the 4 genres.
Yep.
So, that is what it is. But when you go to something like Essen, when you go to something like GenCon, if you're interested in board gaming or RPGs or CCGs, you're home. If you're interested in just war games, you're going to have a little bit of a harder time. But there are conventions that are designed for folks who just like war games. There's conventions for folks who just like RPGs. And there's also conventions, these are all smaller, but conventions for even people who just play like Magic. But those are normally tournaments more than actual conventions. But so GenCon is kind of the big dog. But I go to that pretty much every year, and you're hoping to go probably next year.
Sure. This year I think I'm going to check out the pop-up event because we have some going on actually in town.
So this year GenCon did something new, which I think is really smart. And what they did is they've decided to do these pop-up GenCons. And what they are, for those of you that don't know, is Matt knows this obviously, but for those of you that don't know, pop-up GenCons are. There's 45-ish or almost 45, something between 40 and 45
for this initial year.
For this first year, events or stores.
Yep.
That are predominantly in the United States, but there's a couple over in the UK, I think.
I think so, yes.
And they are during GenCon. They are having events at these stores. So these stores are having special events during GenCon.
Right.
When you go to these events, you can get a cool GenCon pin, and you can get a GenCon style badge, and you can play GenCon games.
You're getting some swag. Yeah,
you get some swag,
you
and
can buy
also
some of the pre-releases.
That's the big thing. Is like a lot of games. The thing about these big conventions a lot of times is that when you go to these conventions, you can sometimes get stuff earlier than before it goes into stores because they get an extra shipment ahead of time, bring it to GenCon, and sell it for retail, and then they don't have to go through distribution. Just the game company that made it gets to make all the money, and it's great for them.
And that makes the large rush every morning.
Exactly. So some of those games are actually going to be available not just at GenCon, but also at these pop-up GenCon places. So this is kind of a special deal. So GenCon reached out to us a month and a half ago or whatever and said, hey, we want our pop-up GenCons to be featured in GameFor. We want to work together with you, partner on this, so we can do that. So that's what we did. So that's going to be very cool. So you're looking at going to a pop-up GenCon in Appleton?
Yeah, I think I'm going to do the Appleton one.
During GenCon, and I'll be at regular GenCon. But there's like a lot of other local conventions too that you've probably got in your area and may not even know about.
Yeah, and that's when I started, because when I moved around and got in with different friends and different priorities. We get to high school, college, kind of get away from board games. When I got back into tabletop, specifically board games, we went to one of our local conventions for the first time. Going back to conventions was called Fire and Ice.
Yeah, that's in Manitowoc, Wisconsin.
Manitowoc.
Been going on for 20 years, I think, almost, or something like that.
And that's
maybe not quite, but close.
And that's a fun little. It's not too little, but
these days it's 500, 600 people maybe over the course of 3 days, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's held at the fairgrounds, I believe. It's what it's considered.
Yeah, the Manitowoc County Expo Center or something
right.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. They now have heated bathrooms. The first year I went, it was because it's held in February.
Late February, yeah. So it's chilly.
Sometimes minus 40.
There was the one year, that I went.
That was my first year. Was the minus 40? It was just
no, because that was it? No, because it was at the Expo Center. The year that I went when it was that cold, it was at the old. It was still in Sheboygan.
Okay.
Yeah, and a much smaller. It was like a town center. It was really tiny.
Okay.
Really tiny. Now, they have plenty of more space, but it's end of February in Wisconsin. It's a crapshoot. Right. You don't know if it's going to be. Everything might be melting. On the other hand, everything might be frozen. So
and last year I didn't make it because we had an ice storm going on.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, which is also problematic. But that's a convention as well that is designed for all types of tabletop gaming. You're going to find a lot of board gaming, but you're also going to find RPGs.
Right.
You're going to find Fire and Ice does and has for years and years and years had a big 40K tournament on Sunday. That's just been like tradition now.
Right. And they've got RPGs going around the corner, around the edges.
Yeah, and they kind of build like little pseudo rooms with like pipe and drape to help with the noise and stuff, which is nice.
That's when I played D&D for like the first time in like 15 years. Was there.
Yeah. Because that's when you got into Adventurers League, right?
Yeah.
So that's very cool. But they also do, there's magic and there's vendors, and that's the thing. Like when you go to these conventions, most normal conventions have and this is really what differentiates a convention versus just like a gathering or whatever. Right. Is there's usually a schedule.
Yep.
When there's some sort of program, whether it's printed or something nowadays you can find on your phone or it's on the web or whatever, that says at 3:00 at this table there's going to be Settlers of Catan, or 2:00 at this table there's going to be Magic Draft, or whatever the deal is.
Right.
And that's really, as opposed to, because there's other types of events which are no less valid, but there's board game events where you just basically show up and bring your board games.
It's just open, yeah.
And it's just open, and you find a table and you just wait for people to walk by and be like, hey, you want to play this? And like a lot of times people will set up the game and then put the lid kind of up.
Right.
So that you can see it as you walk by.
With like looking for players or looking for teachers.
Yeah. And then people will come by and be like, oh, yeah, I'll get in on that. And there's no schedule or anything like that. But that's, it depends on what you like, what you're into.
Mm-hmm.
Fire and Ice is something with a schedule. Always has.
Yep.
Most conventions do. Let's see. The Adepticon, I mentioned that a couple of times. That one is the biggest one in the country for miniatures.
Yep.
But in comparison to 60,000 folks at GenCon, it's like 5,000 folks. But it's still the biggest for miniatures, but that's still like 5,000
But
folks.
yeah, if you've ever been curious about miniatures, I mean, you can get in without paying for... If you're not doing events, you can generally get into these for free.
Like it's in the Chicagoland area. It's in Schaumburg. So if you're interested in it and you live anywhere near there, even a couple hours drive, if you drive there, check it out. You can walk around through the vending area for free. Mm-hmm. You can check things out and whatever. You can't play any of the games really because they're generally tournaments and you had to pre-register and all that jazz.
But you can do some of the demos that are being run at the vendor spaces.
Yeah, absolutely.
And stuff. And that's when I ended up buying my first set of miniatures.
Right.
Because I played a demo and was like, this is absolutely amazing. And
yeah. And so like that kind of thing is really interesting too. That's another big benefit to going to events, is not just like there's a bunch of games there, new games and demos of games you can check out. There's also the vendors, and a lot of times, even still to this day, there's a lot of things you can find vendors at these things that they're not in stores.
Right, you didn't know that product even existed.
Yeah, even if it is a product, maybe you just didn't know it existed because it's not in distribution yet. Or it's just something like this guy goes to this convention and cranks out stuff on his 3D printer and and it's just amazing, or whatever the deal is. Like there's plenty of things still to this day, even more so now because with 3D printing and all kinds of stuff like that, laser cut MDF, all that jazz, there's acrylic, there's a lot of ways that you can manufacture at home almost. Which is really interesting. But those are the types of things you're seeing also cropping up at a lot of these, and especially smaller conventions sometimes too.
Right.
Origins. I just got back from that. That was the end of June.
That's in Columbus, yep.
That's
Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio, and that's like a mini GenCon. That's 20,000 people.
Right.
But it is basically the same sort of format, and you have a vendor area, you've got games and events and programs, and it's mostly board games, but there's still other stuff going on there as well. That one's fun. And then Nova, the Nova Open, is one that I've gone to a bunch, or at least a couple times now. And that one is, Nova stands for Northern Virginia, and it takes place in Northern Virginia, like you're in Northern Virginia, but technically you're like 4 miles from the White House, like because the way that the borders are crazy over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're technically in Northern Virginia, but it's basically DC, and it's the Northern Virginia Open, and it is a big, huge miniatures tournament. But there's still also vending. There's also demo games, and there's all kinds of other stuff going on. Right. There's hobby events and seminars that you can take. Like I'll be there this year. I'm teaching 3 different seminars. So and that one size-wise is probably about 2,500, maybe 3,000 people. Right. So it's about half the size.
And that one, it's for charity.
That one's a lot for and a lot of these conventions also are doing things like that, where they either have some sort of charity raffle or they're trying to raise money for charity. Nova Open is designed, like, it is completely charity, like all of it.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, like they raise money for, last year it was 3 different charities. One of them was definitely Doctors Without Borders, and I forget what the other 2 were. They weren't like big names that I recognized, but yeah, they're all for charity.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so they raise a bunch of money for that kind of stuff.
So you get to enjoy your hobby and feel like you're doing good.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then again, in our neck of the woods, there's another one that's been growing just over the last 6-7 years.
Is it even? Yeah, I think it was just number 5, wasn't it? Or?
The last year was either 5 or 6. This year I think is 7, but I'm not sure on that. We have to double check. It's a convention with kind of a terrible name called Gamehole Con.
Yes.
I'm not exactly sure where the name came from. I think that I don't know if it was somebody like referred to their basement as the game hole, which is kind of like a hobbit hole.
Right.
And then it just expanded. I'm not sure. But again, a general tabletop convention. But I would say that, honestly, RPGs were a little bit stronger there than
well, yeah.
than board games in that situation. And there was also a decent amount of miniatures there.
Right.
The one thing I really didn't see much was I didn't see much in the way of card games. I didn't see a lot of Magic.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
But they had a lot going on, a lot of celebrities going.
Yeah, like within the realm of
like Steve Jackson was standing beside us in a vendor booth.
Yeah, Steve Jackson from Steve Jackson Games was there. We saw
Matt Mercer from
Critical Role, Satine Phoenix. Yep. Other ones. At one point, we were standing and talking to Matthew Lillard.
Yeah,
who is Hollywood's Shaggy, if you remember him. He was also serial killer in Hackers. You remember the movie Hackers?
Right, but he wasn't a serial killer in that. Oh yeah, he was serial killer.
He wasn't.
But I'm thinking of Scream.
Yeah, he was a serial killer in Scream, but his character's name was Serial Killer. Like he eats cereal.
That's right.
And in Hackers and stuff like that. So you probably know Matthew Lillard. He is part of a company called Beetle and Grimm that makes really super fancy high end like add-ons for officially licensed Wizards of the Coast D&D campaigns.
Yeah, they've got a new one coming for the new Baldur's Gate expansion.
Yeah, so like these are expensive and kind of exclusive, but when you and your group are sitting down to play this campaign, instead of just being like, oh, and then you found the Night Guard's badge on the ground and the back had a strange symbol etched on it. Right. Instead, your DM can now hand you this metal badge that's been, and so it's like, and maps are all made out of cloth, and it's
the letters are they're a little bit
super fancy, cool stuff. And he's been playing with these guys, these 2 other guys, possibly Beetle and Grimm, and he's been playing with them, I guess, since middle school.
Right,
that's what he was telling us.
Yeah, so that it was actually their gaming group, and then then they formed this company.
Yeah, so and he's part of it, and it's a very cool convention. It's getting bigger. If you're into, and this is another thing you'd only find at conventions too. They also do the what the heck is that live action thing?
No, I knew you were going to do that to me.
Yeah, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head now. Dungeon. It's a dungeon crawl, and it's not at very many conventions. It's at GenCon. It's at Origins, and it is at one of the PAXs.
Real Dungeon.
Real Dungeon. True Dungeon. True Dungeon is the word. We were those of you who knew what I was talking about were yelling at your computer or whatever. Sorry.
Or
But yeah, so True Dungeon is at all of these big conventions, GenCon, Origins, all that stuff, and also in Madison, Wisconsin at GameFor. And evidently the reason for that is because the folks who run GameFor, we were told, bought
it. Right. They wanted it there.
True Dungeon because they wanted it to be at GameFor, so they just bought it. And I'm like, all right, well, that's cool. So yeah, True Dungeon is kind of it's not live action in that you get totally all dressed up and hit each other with foam swords.
Right.
It's more like an escape room where you're escaping from room to room to room, and there's puzzles and things like that. And you do have these little plastic discs that have like your weapons on them. And there's an entire subculture of people who buy and sell and trade these plastic discs for True Dungeon. I don't know a ton about it, honestly, but that's a thing you can really only find at conventions as well.
Right. And then, sometimes the old school video games too. What was the one was it Mech Warrior there, or is that Origins?
Oh, yeah. There's the BattleTech pods.
Yeah.
Back in the day, yeah. Like there used to be these centers. There was one in Chicago, and I think one out in L.A. where it was like, and this is in the like late 90s, early 2000s, where you could go and you'd pay like a certain amount and you'd be able to hang out there all day and play in these BattleTech pods, which were these completely enclosed pods that had multiple screens and all kinds of huge joysticks and crazy shenanigans.
Awesome vector graphics.
Yeah, back then the graphics were awesome. These days they're not as good, but they still take those guys were at Origins.
They're functional and
they keep these machines all running and stuff like that. And like I remember years ago at GenCon, not that long ago, 3 years ago, I was like, you know what? I'm going to play some of this. I haven't played this in years. This will be a lot of fun. So I walk up and I'm like, yeah, I want to get in and play some of this. He's like, okay, well, we've got some time available at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like they are like seriously like
right, they're booked.
They're booked like for a long time. So like if you want to come back at 3 o'clock in the morning, we can put you down and then you can play then, but you can only play like twice because then by 5 o'clock it starts picking up again or whatever, And it was crazy. So, I mean, this type of stuff is the things that you can do at these kinds of gaming conventions. And even beyond just the things you can do, the people that you can meet.
Right.
Like there's people that I'm friends with only because I see them at conventions.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays because of the internet and apps and all the kinds of things, you can keep in touch with them a lot easier than you used to be able to. There used to be people you just only saw once a year.
Right,
but
now you can meet the creators.
Oh yeah, that's true too. You're also interfacing directly with the people who design these games.
There's a guy that I play pinball with that has one of the original Dungeon Master guides that's signed by Guy Gax at GaryCon. He went every year and has it signed every single year. Well, had it signed every single year. So, because you got to meet him just by hanging out there.
Yeah. GaryCon is a big one in, that's kind of on your bucket list.
That is on my bucket list.
GaryCon is also here in Wisconsin. It's in Lake Geneva.
Yes.
Which is where not only GenCon started, but it's also where TSR started. TSR was the original company that started Dungeons and Dragons,
right?
And then Wizards of the Coast bought TSR in the late '90s, I think.
Yep. So it's ridiculously close for me not having gone.
Right, exactly. It's like what is it, an hour and a half drive, maybe
something like that. Yeah.
So the problem, at least with me, partially, is that A, I'm not as big of an RPG player, and B, again, this upcoming year, evidently, it's
same time as Adepticon.
So for me, I'm not planning on going. But it is just RPGs. There's to be fair, like every once in a while you'll see somebody play a Magic or something like that or whatever. Again, they're waiting for the next game. But for the most part, it's designed to be basically aimed towards, the RPG stuff. And again, you see, Matt Mercer's and Satine Phoenix and what's his name? The guy who does all the Dwarven Forge.
Right, they did the Netflix.
They did the Netflix documentary called Dwarvenaut or whatever.
There's more people yelling at their screens.
Again, I can't think of his name. I've met him. Stefan something. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, I met him at Origins actually a couple of years ago, and he's a super nice guy. But like those types of people, are going to this, which is really cool. And then also on your bucket list is also GenCon,
which again, but to be fair, I did not live in Wisconsin when it was in Wisconsin.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
So that helps a little bit of my credibility. But yeah, GenCon, that conference usually runs up against it, and
makes it problematic as well.
Yeah, so and
it's also really hard to get rooms.
It's hard to get rooms.
There's 60,000 plus people trying to get there.
Not all of us has friends that have magical.
Yeah, I know. I'm blessed in that I've got a friend who's really good at getting hotel rooms for GenCon, so that helps a lot. Now, admittedly, there's 6 of us in one hotel room, but it's technically, this year it's a really nice big hotel room, so that'll be good too, hopefully.
You paid your dues. You're allowed.
So that'll be good. That'll be fine. And then we mentioned Essenspiel.
Yeah, Essenspiel.
In Germany.
Yeah, I took German in high school, and then, Europe, and being the largest in the world, just to, even just say that, hey, I've been there.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And check it out.
Yeah.
So.
For me, I would definitely like to go see Salute, which is in the UK once a year. And it's crazy because the UK does a lot of, I don't know, but did Salute go 2 days this year? Generally, a lot of the conventions over in the UK are a one-day affair.
Right.
And it's partially because everything is a lot more expensive, like Expo-wise. Like everything's so small and everything's old and it's just
compact,
difficult. Yeah, so it's difficult to find like a big place that big to be able to do stuff and afford to have it for 2 days is just evidently... it's crazy to me, but that's what it is. So I would like to check that out eventually. And then it's not exactly a gaming event, but kind of it is. Warhammer World also in the UK in Nottingham. I'd like to go check that out, and potentially my wife and I might be going to the UK this year. So
nice.
Yeah. So that we wouldn't be able to make it to Salute because Salute is also strangely enough right around the exact same time as Adepticon, which is kind of weird. Those guys should all kind of like link up and get that stuff figured out.
Make it a little bit easier for us to.
Yeah. But Warhammer World does also have a big event usually in May, so we would just go and like it's open all the time or whatever. But there is like a special event that they do once a year, which again won't be during the time we're there. We're looking at maybe October. So
nice.
But yeah, there's a lot of benefit to going to a gaming event, whether it's something small and local nearby you,
right,
or whether it's saving up your money and going to like a big,
right. There's
huge,
a size for everybody too.
Absolutely, and there's a specific convention for everybody too.
Right,
specifics. Not only just the size, but also like there's
if you want competitive or casual,
right,
or learning an expo,
just RPGs or just board games or just Magic or just miniatures, whatever you're looking for. And again, like I said, especially when you go to the local conventions, which I always push people, they should try to go to local conventions. If you go to local conventions, not only are you going to find all kinds of interesting games and things like that, but you're probably also going to find people who also are kind of local. And then you will meet them in person, and then you probably might get together and play again other games later on after the convention.
Great place to find it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, anyway, I think that's pretty much about it for our talk about conventions and stuff. We've kind of rambled on a little bit about... I talked a lot about GenCon probably.
Right.
But,
that's okay.
It's cool.
But, and again, the pop-up events, if by the time you're listening to this, you probably still have time to check out, see if there's one local to you.
Yeah, if you're listening to this on the day that it launches or right around there, depending whether you're listening on audio or listening to it on YouTube, you'll be able to still find local, if there are any local ones near you.
Tickets left,
yeah, absolutely, and check those out. And maybe you're listening to this while you're waiting in line or something at GenCon, and maybe you'll see me walk by and you can wave and I'll wave back or talk to you or whatever. That's also fun. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. Yeah, so that's pretty much the show. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the GameFor Podcast. If you've got questions or comments and you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below. If you're listening via your favorite podcast player, and we're on 9 different podcast networks now.
Yeah,
like
including. I didn't even know there was 9.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but now like Apple and Spotify and all those different ones. But if you're listening to this on your podcast player, you're just not into the whole YouTube comment section thing, then you can feel free to reach out to us via email at podcast@iamgamefor.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And lastly, to find out more about the GameFor platform designed to connect tabletop gamers and even to potentially help you find local conventions in your area, please check out the website at www.iamgamefor.com. That is www.iamgamefor.com. Thanks.
See you next time.